Welcome back, Chappelle. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your Flip Classroom and our continuing discussion of that all-encompassing Renaissance, right? And we're about to get real weird right now. Not weird in a bad way. Weird in kind of an interesting good way, right? Because we actually have moved so quickly that we're almost at the very end of our Renaissance content, right? Now, I'll give you a heads up when this happens, but here in a few minutes, we're going to start talking about stuff that's not even on this next test. It's going to be on the next test, right? All right, so now look, big thing about it, though, is we left off our last flip talking about Niccolo Machiavelli, the Prince, right? And we'll talk about this a little bit later as well. We'll review it very heavily during the actual review. But I need y'all to do me a favor, okay? I need you to do me a favor. We are not going to have time to do a crazy intense warm-up and stuff like that during actual class because we have to keep moving on our artwork presentations. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to be responsible for reviewing this last content, right? Reviewing the stuff about St. Thomas Aquinas, Dante, Petrarch, the printing press, Johannes Gutenberg, and also Niccolo Machiavelli in his writing of The Prince, right? Remember, it is better for a ruler to be feared rather than loved, but he should try to be both. Now, the thing about when we're looking at this as well, we're going to start keeping going on our Renaissance stuff, right? And if you need some extra help and stuff like that, I'm going to hold an extra review session before your next test, right? It's going to be during an S period. We all are all going to come in, and we're going to talk about some of these writers and stuff like that. We'll review them super heavy. We'll go over them a bunch of times and stuff like that, and just make sure that you got them, okay? But I'll send that email out when we actually get back to school, okay? But you're watching this at your house right now, right? You're watching this at your house right now. You're on that virtual day. We got a house coming up and stuff like that. Super exciting, all right? Hope you all enjoyed the video. I know Miss Pierce worked super hard on it, right? Now, going into it, though, okay? Big stuff that we got to talk about, all right? We're now moving into talking about a little bit off the heels of the stuff that we've been presenting in class, right? We got to through a few artworks. It's tough to get through a lot of them in an hour-long class. We're going to get through as many of them as we possibly can in our next one, okay? So going into it, though, we got two parts to this whole Renaissance. Now, this is something that we started talking about during your presentations themselves, right? During your presentations, we began to discuss the fact that there are two phases of the Renaissance, right? There is the Italian Renaissance, and then there's the Northern Renaissance, all right? Now, the Italian Renaissance is basically the Renaissance, its art, and its boosted economy that's going to start and create itself in Italy. But your Northern Renaissance is going to be heavily connected to the trade that's coming in through Italy. Their economics are going to boost forward as well. But when we say Northern, we're basically talking about any country that exists outside of Italy, particularly focusing in on some that are France, the Netherlands, the Holy Roman Empire, and a little bit of England as well, right? So, like, those are your big Northern Renaissance countries, right? By the way, the Holy Roman Empire at this point is just a fancy, fun little word that we use for basically Germany before it was ever Germany, right? Most of the people in the Holy Roman Empire actually spoke German during this time period, but Germany doesn't become a country until 1871. So, yeah, that's pretty intense, and make sure you know that, right? Now, going into it, though, okay, how do you spot the difference, though, between an Italian piece of art like this one, which is The Creation of Adam by Michelangelo, of course, on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, or this one, the Arnolfini portrait by Jan van Eyck, or this one, which is an engraving by Albrecht Dürer. It's called Night, Death, and the Devil, right? Like, so, like, how do you actually spot the difference between all these different things? That, like, Albrecht Dürer is also super pixelated. Give me a hot second. Let me find a better picture for you. All right, now that looks a little bit better, doesn't it? That's a better view of Night, Death, and the Devil by Albrecht Dürer. That right there is also a Northern Renaissance artwork. Albrecht Dürer was a German man himself and things like that, that made one of this fantastic pieces that's a part of what is known as his Meistertisch, right? Like now, like, so the thing about it that we're looking at this, though, you need to understand the differences between all this stuff. Like, well, how can you tell? How can you, a person on the street, walk into a museum and be like, oh, that's Northern Renaissance and that's Italian Renaissance, right? Well, let's talk about that. We've got two little columns that you can actually use to kind of delineate them. Well, one of the biggest things that actually is one of the attention grabbers of Italian artwork is its bright use of color, right? Like, think Primavera, right? Like, good job, y'all, that presented today, too. Shout out to everybody that presented on the Primavera. A big one as well. Lily Villarubio, Brianna Darwin, and Eve here, y'all crushed it, right? So going into it, though, as well, something that we need to understand, bright colors, right? Primavera, Birth of Venus, like, all those guys are very brightly colored. This fresco right here by Michelangelo is super brightly colored, right? Whereas Northern artwork doesn't use nearly as much color, but it does use a heavy amount of detail, right? If you're looking at the Arnolfini portrait, like looking in at her dress right here, this thing is not a very large piece of painting. This painting is only 2 feet by 2 feet, but look at the hyper detail between her dress, the fur, and even the dog right here at the bottom, and there's individual hairs that he's painted, right? So high detail is a big attribute of Northern Renaissance, whereas in Italian Renaissance, you're also going to see Greek, Roman, and mythological figures, right? For example, whoever's presenting about Perseus holding the head of Medusa, That's a Greek myth, right? Whoever's presenting anything about, The Last Judgment by Michelangelo has Charon, the boatman, who is actually a Greek mythological figure, just down the road from Jesus, who's like right upstairs. You know what I mean? Like, so all these Greek, Roman, and mythological figures are heavily connected to Italian Renaissance artwork, whereas Northern Renaissance artwork includes a lot more regular people, right? Regular people, the lives of a regular person, sometimes even poor people, right? Which is a really, really big thing as well. There's a very, very famous piece. I think it's by Peter Bruegel or possibly Hans Holbein. I'll have to look into it. It's called The Peasant Wedding, and it's literally poor people wedding. And literally, that's what they thought that now was worthy of being painted, right? So regular people can make their way into Renaissance artworks. The Arnolfini portrait, this one actually is focused around a merchant family, right? A man and his wife, who may or may not be dead. Now, going into it though, sorry, Isabella Hike, I didn't mean to take that from you. Now, going into it though, also, regular people, even peasants, can make their way into Northern artwork. Now, there's another big thing about it as well, is technique and types of artwork. Now, Italian artists, you would sometimes see use frescoes. They both, Italian and Northern, use paintings and stuff like that. You're going to see frescoes and sculptures more often in Italian, whereas you're going to see a different kind of thing as well in a Northern artwork. You're going to see these things called woodcuts, right? Like, this is going to be really, really big because it actually uses the printing press to make artwork, right? This, for example, Albrecht Dürer's Night, Death, and the Devil, is a woodcut or an engraving, right? Where literally he had to take a block of wood that almost looked like this, and he had to etch everything into it using a stylus dipped in acid, and then literally whatever was left behind, he'd be able to press it onto paper. So there's multiple copies of this thing running around. But engravings and woodcuts were a heavily used thing in like the Northern arts, whereas in Italy they weren't very popular, right? And then the other big thing about it is in Italian artwork, you're going to see a lot of Christian themes, and then in Northern artwork, you're going to see a lot of Christian themes. So this is the thing that they both share, okay? So just because Christianity is present in it doesn't necessarily indicate if it's Northern or Italian, okay? But that's a really, really good little cool list right there. So we actually might play this game a little bit when we're doing the rest of our presentations. I'm going to throw something up there and you're going to be like, boom, Italian, a boom, Northern, boom, I don't know, right? And then I'll help you out. It's not a big deal whatsoever. But the big thing that we also need to understand a little bit as well is we're now getting into your next unit, okay? So do me a favor, okay? You're going to basically be like moving a page over. That's going to be the Renaissance. And now we're going to be talking about something that we're actually going to be really, really getting deep into after your next test, right? We're talking about this thing known as the Reformation, right? Now, the Reformation is going to be huge, right? Like, so huge, absolutely massive. You definitely need to know this, okay? So the Reformation, super, super important. And it's going to be the main bulk context of your next unit that you're going to take your next test on. But we're going to begin it now. And the reason why we're beginning it now is because y'all are awesome. And we covered all of our content. And y'all are so smart and stuff like that. And just because you're so awesome and smart, we now just got to keep going, right? I got to give you something to do. So now, the thing we need to understand, though, as well. Oh, by the way, speaking of something to do, don't forget that take-home quiz that you got to make sure you get done, okay? You can use all your notes, use notes, knock stuff out, okay? Like, so whatever you got to do. But it's like 10 multiple-choice questions, so be careful when you're answering them and stuff like that, because if you get one wrong, it's like minus 10 points, right? So going into it, though, we're now going to be talking about the Reformation as well. Now, the Reformation is super, super important because people are going to begin to use those humanist ideas of the Renaissance, right? That idea of questioning everything, to question the central force in their lives. And that central force is none other than the church, right? And they're going to begin to question the church in a heavy way. So something that we need to understand, that we were looking back into the late Middle Ages, the high Middle Ages and stuff like that, the Catholic Church had become very, very powerful. And the only church that existed in Western Europe during this time period is none other than that Catholic Church, right? The Catholic Church was massive, right? Super intense, very, very powerful, and they could literally dictate the progression of Western society, both politically and economically. Like, if you're looking at the Catholic Church, they had so much money. Y'all, the Sistine Chapel ceiling got painted by Michelangelo Buonarroti, right? The Sistine Chapel ceiling, it's a chapel, it's a church, all right? Like, so, and that means that the church paid for it, okay? Sometimes I wonder about it, I'm like, oh, should we have been spending almost $1 million on a fresco painting? We could have been helping other people and stuff like that. That right there is a Renaissance style question that's going to be forced against the church, right? Now, the thing about it is, though, also is that the Catholic Church by this point had beginning to get a little corrupt, right? There were some sketchy popes and stuff like that. And really quick disclaimer, Mr. Terry is not saying that anything about the current Catholic Church is wrong, all right? I hope everybody hears that, okay? Mr. Terry is not saying anything about the current Catholic Church. He's talking about the one from the 14 and 1500s, all right? Now, going into it, though, as well, something that you need to understand is that the Reformation is going to be a movement that's going to split the church in Western Europe and lead to the creation formation of many new churches and new things known as denominations, right? For example, denominations are a subgroup or a small part of a bigger idea, okay? Now, denominations of Christianity include all the other parts of Christianity that aren't necessarily Catholic or a part of the main church, right? For example, I was raised Baptist, right? And I was raised in a Protestant community, and then there's a Baptist community. So I was a different denomination of Christianity than you are. I'm the same thing, still a Christian, but just raised in a different community, and there's different beliefs and different ideas, right? You might know people that are Jehovah's Witnesses. You might know people that are Methodists or Episcopalian or Lutheran, right? They're going to be really important going into this whole thing. They're different denominations of Christianity. Same idea, Christianity, but it's just a different construct of it, right? Now, these denominations, though, are very, very important because you need to understand that there's a massive difference between a religion and a denomination. The religion is Christianity. Denomination is a smaller group of them, right? Catholic Church, considered a denomination. Protestant churches, denominations, and there's buttloads of other Protestant churches as well. So a religion, Christianity. So if you hear somebody say, I am Protestant, they're still Christian, right? They're still Christian, they still worship the Christian faith and stuff like that. They just aren't the same denomination as you. You see how that works? All right, so now, for example, it's kind of like we all love pizza, but we don't all love the same toppings on our pizza. So the different denominations will be like different toppings of your pizza. I'm a big pepperoni guy, huge pepperoni guy, but not all of you are. Some of you are like a just plain cheese pizza person, right? You're boring, whatever. But the thing about it that you need to understand is you be a different denomination of me because we both believe in pizza, but we just like it differently, right? So now look, think about it when we're looking at this though as well. So basically what happened is, right, religion, Christianity, right, is going to have a split that's going to occur in the Great Schism in 1053 AD. You talked about this in your religion classes, Mr. Madron and Mr. Mathern. You're talking about it now with me as well, right? Happened in the Byzantine Empire. It was over bread and the Pope and the Eucharist and all this other stuff, right? And it's going to cause a split in the church, right? And this schism is going to lead to the establishment of the Roman Catholic Church, and it's going to lead to the establishment of the Eastern Orthodox Church, right? Well, another split is going to happen right around 1517 AD when the Protestant Reformation begins. And Roman Catholicism still exists, but now you're going to end up with a new branch of people known as Protestants, right? And the Protestant Reformation started in 1517 AD when Martin Luther began his campaign to reorder and reform the Catholic Church, right? Hence, Protestant Reformation, to reform the Catholic Church, right? And also, just so you understand as well, there's tons of types of Protestants, right? You don't need to write all this stuff down, but there's bunches and bunches and bunches of them, right? You got Lutherans, Pentecostals, Methodists, Baptists, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Episcopalians, Seventh-day Adventists, Calvinists, which have a bunch of their own things going on as well. So as you can tell as well, there's bunches of different types of Christians now. All different denominations, and this was caused by the Protestant Reformation. You are being taught right now by somebody who was not raised Catholic. I have to go get my blessing and stuff like that in Mass because I'm not Catholic, right? That is because I'm a different denomination. Still things, same central thing, central idea, right? Still Christian, just not the same kind, right? So going into it though as well, these are all denominations, right? So as you can tell, this is a very, very important flip for talking about the syntax and word usage for how you actually understand all this stuff. Now, going into it though as well, something that you also need to understand is that Catholicism in the 1400s is very, very important because the church was falling subject to a lot of financial corruption and a lot of stuff that carried over into the Renaissance, right? So when we're talking about that, you got a lot of different examples of church corruption, right? Again, disclaimer, there's nothing wrong with the Catholic faith itself, okay? But to name a few things that were pretty sketchy, though, during the 1400s and 1300s, there's a lot of different stuff going on, right? You got papal supremacy, which is, of course, when popes are claiming authority over other kind of secular authorities, right? They're trying to use their political power to actually force kings to do things for them, right? Bad popes oftentimes are going to operate more like monarchs of states rather than they waged war, they taxed people, they led super lavish lives. There's these other crazy stories as well that I want you to go ahead and write down. We're going to talk about them in class a little bit. One of them is called the Cadaver Synod, when literally one pope put another pope's dead body on trial. Julius II, the guy that paid for the Sistine Chapel ceiling, was known as the warrior pope because he invaded Italy at least 3 different times and stuff like that. And he also bought his papal reign. They used nepotism to actually get into power, right? But the big thing about it is, though, is we're going to cut it right there, right? And we're going to stop right there, and we're going to carry that new stuff over into our new unit after we wrap up our Renaissance tests and stuff like that. But go ahead and stop right there. We're going to talk about the Reformation in our next stuff. I'll see y'all soon.